Will America fall? When to pour, how to pour. This could be the era billions of people around the world have asked a question that no one can answer. Our generation of Chinese. I grew up watching The Power of America, watch his movies on his cell phone, spurred by his sanctions. News in many people's hearts. He is that powerful being, but every invincible empire in history finally fell. Is the US an exception? Welcome back to the world to reorganize the national transportation of 80 countries. Reading 80 years after World War II. I am Yonghua, the leader of the capital. Today is the 73rd episode of the National Transportation Series, The Great American Summer. To talk about decline, you must first clarify a principle: the fall of every empire in history. Almost none of them were punched by their opponents. It's that his stall is too big, the cost of maintaining it exceeds the benefits he can extract. You are dragged down by your own understanding. It's called Imperial overreach. We will use this ruler today. Measure America's first money-burning wall. Being the world's leader is not free. The United States is present in about 80 countries, maintains 750 military bases, 170,000 garrison, to maintain 11 aircraft carrier battle groups to patrol the world, to be the one to come out in every hotspot. This global order, it's made of real money. His annual military budget is $997.3 billion, 1/3 of the world. Where does the money come from? A large part is borrowed. As of October 2025, total national debt exceeds $38 trillion. That's 30% more than his annual GDP. 2025 alone. A year's interest is close to $1 trillion, more than his world's largest military expenditure. 38 trillion. Can't feel it directly. Spread it on every American's head: men, women, and children. $110,000 each. A family of 3 is more than $300,000, equivalent to a suite. This is just what the government owes. The mortgage and car loan of each family are not counted. Put these two things together. The problem is that he is relying on borrowing money to maintain hegemony, and the hole is getting bigger and bigger. His debt is up 5 or 6% a year. The economy only rises by 2 points a year. The debt rose more than twice as fast as the family's wealth right after the war. His debt and GDP are also high, but that's what you owe to win a battle today. This 38 trillion, it is out of year after year that the income cannot be offset. The fiscal gap in 2024 alone is 1.80 trillion. The former kind of debt can be settled by a victory. The latter is structural. It will only get bigger and bigger. Rome was like that. The territory is getting bigger and bigger. The cost of raising troops to defend borders overwhelms finances. You have to keep raising taxes. Inject the currency more and more fragmented. You end up getting poorer. The poorer you are, the more you can't hold on. The United States replaced printing US dollars to issue government bonds. Same logic. The stall is large to a certain extent. Sustaining him became a burden that brought him down. The second pillar is loosening at the same time. What does an empire depend on? The United States relies on 4 pillars of global military, dollar, fintech, industry, ally system. We saw how thick he was in the last episode. This episode is about these 4 pillars are being used for the same reason, sinking at the same time. It's too expensive to maintain a global presence. He's starting to get tired. So they force their allies to pay more under his pressure. NATO countries promise to pay for their military all the way up to 5% of GDP. On the surface, he won the cost to be shared by others, but plumb is he admitting one thing: he can't carry this burden alone. Gotta let the boys help. The strong never need to be shared by others. Let's look at the dollar. His greatest financial asset is the world's trust in the dollar, but he has frozen the assets of other countries at every turn. Over the years, kick people out of the settlement system. It is equivalent to spending the principal of this trust again and again. After the Roe conflict, he froze the Russian central bank in one go. Hundreds of billions of dollars in overseas reserves move, and the whole world remembered it. Money is put in this system. What day did you provoke him? It can become a pile of numbers that cannot be taken out at any time. The result is that countries are starting to see backup. Some oil fruits try to settle for oil in another currency. A group of emerging countries are promoting the use of their own currencies for business. Central banks have been buying gold for 3 years in a row. Net purchases of more than 1,000 tons in 2024. The share of the dollar in global reserves, from 71% in 2000 to 57% today. Trust this thing. It takes decades to save up flowers quickly. Then look at the industry. This is the hardest one. The most dangerous. The dollar is too strong. Printing money can buy everything in the world, so the manufacturing industry moved out in large numbers. The only thing left in China is finance and high technology. Decades down, what was once the industrial heartland has rusted to pieces. It's called the Rust Belt. And today 1/3 of global manufacturing value added is in China, a hegemonic state. The ability to build things depends on others. It's time to fight. It's a fatal vulnerability. Really, at war, it's about who can make a steady stream of cannonballs. Warship drone. A daily industrial product relies heavily on importing. Country. Where does the temporary capacity come from? The foundation of hegemony is supposed to be the roar of factories, now it's mostly empty finally. Look at allies, he forced his allies to pay protection money while wielding tariff dams on allies. The mindset of allies changes. Europe is already clamoring for strategic autonomy to rearm, reduce your dependence on him. Allies follow willingly. It became calculated cooperation once the centripetal force dissipates the people behind him. No longer unconditional power. In 2025, the European Union threw one. At a time the size of 800 billion euros rearming plan obviously want to take safety back into his hands. Allies who were willing to lean against the wall start building your own wall. The reason why the four pillars are loose is the same. The cost of maintaining them is getting higher and higher, and he can't afford it anymore and more only by overdraft, just by calculating, by getting others to share it. Chapter 3. Immigration. Countries forget who you are and be the boss of the world. It costs money to send troops. Worry about the world. The premise of all this, it is twisted into a rope. In China we all identify with the same country willing to work for him, but the American rope is unraveling. We must first clarify what kind of country the United States is. He and Germany, Japan is different. No common ancestor, common bloodline. It's a country of immigrants. People from all over the world came together. It's a set of shared beliefs. Stick everyone, we're all Americans. They all share the same American dream, all share the same set of values. This identity is his true foundation, but now the foundation is cracking in half, broken in half. See the two halves. First, the opposition between Republicans and Democrats. It's not what it used to be. Proof of the policy of collecting more taxes or less taxes. Today they are arguing about abortion, it's guns, it's immigrants, it's religion, it's race, or even the history of this country. Almost every fundamental problem, both split into two that ignore each other, factions that dislike each other. What Americans are fighting for today is no longer their interests, it's identity. What kind of American are you? A country divided into two. No one can convince anyone. The US doesn't even pass a budget every year. The government was forced to shut down several times. The longest closing time is more than 30 days. The proportion of immigrants in the total population of the United States already from less than 5% in 1970 up to about 18% of today's nearly 50 million people. It used to be called the melting pot. People who can turn the world around merge into a common American, but now he looks more and more like a salad. All ethnic groups have their own way, speak your own language, guarding the culture of their home country. It is better to identify with yourself than to identify with America. The wealth gap is the oil poured on these two cracks. The richest half of American families holding 97.5% of the country's wealth. The other half only gets 2.5%. Manufacturing relocation and took away the jobs of a large number of ordinary people. These people who have been financially dumped most easily angry. It is easiest to direct anger at immigrants, point to the elite, so the party and government are more fierce, stronger groups. The wealth gap is not the root cause of the disease. It's the catalyst that makes it worse. Fold these things together, that's the conclusion. A nation of immigrants built on identity. We are losing who we are, the most fundamental consensus on where to go together and be the world leader, and that's what you need most. It requires domestic consent to pay and agree to send troops, agree to continue to carry the world. When a country, even our gang, is starting to waver, how else could he pull together? Go be the boss who cares about the world. Chapter 4. How will he fall? Three things bite together, point to the same conclusion. He is becoming more and more unable to support himself. This empire, let's get this straight, it's still the #1 economy in the world today. No opponent of technology and military can directly replace it. He's not going to collapse one morning. His decline will be something else. Can't afford it anymore, just little by little. Thank you, unmoving garrison. Let the allies share first, quietly shrink again. Unsustainable promises discounted one by one. The money you can't afford is still dragged on by borrowing your salary. Just like a person with a big family business doesn't break overnight. Instead, sell the distant house first, fire a few more servants. Decent, slow descent. And this decline is often relative. It's not that he became poor overnight, it's that he's getting harder and harder. Others are going up. There's a trade-off. That unique position will slowly lose its hold. This process could take decades, slow to the depths, and no one in it may notice, but once the direction is set, it's hard to turn back. Rome exited like this, Spain exited like this, the British Empire did the same. It wasn't knocked down by anyone. One day I suddenly discovered himself. I can't support my big self anymore. This is the meaning of too big to fail. The coldest put the countries in this article together. Destiny varies. Germany has become what its neighbors wanted to be, stable but devastated. The upper limit. Japan has grown into something its neighbors don't want. It's holding the ceiling down. Russia relies on selling resources, drag the collapse back again and again. All three were trapped by outsiders or circumstances, and the United States is the fourth most special. No one can hold him from the outside. His opponent is himself. Make your own stall. Too big. More and more dead. People who are increasingly unwilling to pay. A true enemy of an empire, never a rival beyond the border. It was the stall he made that was too big. How stretched he was back then, how hard it is to maintain today. Strong to the top, going down is almost the only direction. The difference is only in speed. Decent or not, this is the last stop of the big but not the guide. Let's watch these 2 episodes of America. I don't want him to fail, I don't feel sorry for him, but to see no one can stand on top forever. The strength of today, there will always be a day to turn the page. He's got oil. Tie allies, tie the world can't tie one. The iron law has no empire. You can always support yourself in your prime. Next, let's switch to a group of countries to see another kind of national luck. This is too big to fail. We look together, sober and compassionate. See you in the next episode.